The machines in room 412 had stopped their rhythmic beeping, leaving only the devastating silence of a countdown. She was 26, and her heart had roughly 8 hours left to beat. But as midnight struck, the shadow that stepped into her hospital room didn't bring death. It brought forever. The rain lashing against the 7th-floor windows of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center on York Avenue felt like a fitting backdrop for an ending. Inside room 412, the air was heavy with the sterile scent of bleach, saline, and the inescapable underlying odor of cellular decay. Audrey Kensington sat propped up against a mountain of stiff, white hospital pillows, her skin possessing the translucent, brittle quality of antique parchment. She was dying. This wasn't a poetic, gradual fading into the night. It was a brutal, systematic shutdown. The refractory acute myeloid leukemia, specifically a viciously aggressive strain carrying the FLT3-1TD genetic mutation, had finally breached her last line of defense. The experimental venetoclax trial had failed. Her white blood cell count was non-existent. Dr. Jonathan Hayes, the lead oncologist whose usually composed demeanor had made him a pillar of strength for hundreds of patients, stood at the foot of her bed. He looked entirely defeated. The heavy bags under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights analyzing her charts in the private hematology lab on the 3rd floor. "I am so incredibly sorry, Audrey," Dr. Hayes said, his voice fracturing. He closed the thick, physical chart he still preferred over the iPad. "The latest bone marrow biopsy confirms it. The blasts have overwhelmed the marrow. Your liver and kidneys are cascading into acute failure. We can increase the dilaudid drip to manage the pain, but—" He swallowed hard, the Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. "You should call whoever you need to call. You likely won't make it to sunrise." Audrey didn't cry. She had spent the last 2 years crying in cramped Manhattan apartment bathrooms and in the back of yellow cabs. Now there was only a vast, echoing emptiness. "There's no one left to call, Dr. Hayes. My parents passed in the crash back in the 2018. I'm the last one." Dr. Hayes squeezed her frail, bruised hand, his professional boundary crumbling for a fraction of a second before he nodded, whispered a final apology, and left the room. Nurse Brenda lingered just long enough to adjust the IV line and dim the fluorescent lights, leaving Audrey alone in the blue-gray gloom of a New York night. At 11:43 p.m., the atmospheric pressure in the room plummeted. Audrey felt it first in her chest, a sudden, sharp restriction of air that had nothing to do with her failing lungs. The digital thermostat on the wall flickered, the red numbers dropping from a comfortable 72 degrees to 60, then 55. The condensation on the window pane crystallized into frost. Outside the heavy wooden door of her room, the usual chaotic hum of the night shift, the squeak of rubber soles, the distant intercom pages, went dead silent. It wasn't a gradual quieting, it was an instantaneous void, as if a vacuum had been pulled over the entire oncology ward. Then the door opened. He didn't walk in. He simply appeared to occupy the space where, previously, there had been nothing. He was impossibly tall, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that looked like it belonged in the private, wood-paneled boardrooms of Wall Street rather than a sterile hospital. His features were striking, sculpted with the kind of ruthless symmetry that made human eyes uncomfortable. Dark hair swept back from a pale, aristocratic forehead. But it was his eyes that arrested her failing heart. They were a piercing, iridescent amber, glowing faintly in the dim light, like the predatory gaze of a big cat caught in headlights. Audrey reached for the call button with trembling fingers, assuming the morphine was finally causing heavy hallucinations. "I wouldn't bother with that, Audrey," the man said. His voice was a physical sensation, a rich, dark velvet that seemed to vibrate directly against her ribs, bypassing her ears entirely. The night nurse on duty, Brenda, I believe her name is currently caught in a localized stasis loop at the nurse's station. She will spend the next hour believing she is endlessly searching for a dropped pen. Audrey's finger hovered over the red button. Who are you? Are you the Grim Reaper? Because if you are, you're overdressed. A faint, dangerous smile played on his lips. My name is Nathaniel Cross, and I am far older and far more demanding than death. He stepped closer, moving with a fluid grace that defied physics. He stood over her bed, looking down at her ruined body, not with pity, but with a sharp, clinical fascination. The doctors here are brilliant mechanics, Audrey, but they are limited by the frailties of human science. Dr. Hayes is weeping in his office down the hall right now because he thinks your unique blood is a tragedy. He doesn't realize it is a treasure. My blood is literal poison right now, she whispered, her breathing turning shallow. Your blood, Nathaniel corrected, leaning in so close she could smell the scent of petrichor and cold night air radiating off his skin, carries a dormant, ancient antigen. The O-Rh null variant, the golden blood. Only 43 people on this planet possess it, but yours is the only one mutating under the pressure of this specific leukemia. Your body is trying to evolve, Audrey. The cancer isn't just killing you. It's a byproduct of your human vessel failing to contain a genetic awakening. You're crazy, she gasped, a wave of agony rolling through her abdomen as her liver spasmed. I am the king of the Nocturne Syndicate, Nathaniel said softly, placing a hand over her blanket. The pain in her abdomen instantly evaporated, replaced by a shocking, numbing cold. I govern the unseen predators of this city, the immortals you read about in cheap fiction. And my race is dying from a blood-borne pathogen we contracted a century ago. We cannot synthesize a cure because we lack a living host with your exact, mutated antigen. He leaned closer, his amber eyes searing into hers. The doctor said you have 1 night left. I am here to offer you eternity, but I require a trade. Audrey's mind struggled to process the impossible words against the backdrop of her failing biology. A vampire, a king, a cure. It was madness, yet the complete absence of pain where his hand rested over her body was an undeniable, terrifying reality. A trade? She choked out, her voice barely a rasp. I have nothing. Look at me. I weigh 90 pounds. My veins are collapsed. I am a corpse waiting for a toe tag. You have the antigen, Nathaniel replied, his gaze unwavering. If you die tonight, the mutation dies with your marrow. I cannot extract it from a dead body. The cells must be alive, thriving, and immortalized. I can purge the leukemia from your system. I can replace your frail, failing humanity with the apex architecture of my kind. You will never feel pain, sickness, or decay again. You will walk through the centuries beside me. And in return, she asked, her heart hammering a frantic, fragile rhythm against her ribs. In return, you become the progenitor of our cure, Nathaniel stated, his tone shifting from regal to ruthlessly pragmatic. Your blood will be harvested, safely, painlessly, to synthesize the vaccine my people desperately need. You will be bound to me, to the Syndicate. You will be a queen in the shadows, but make no mistake, Audrey, you will belong to our world. Forever. A violent cough racked Audrey's body, bringing up a speck of bright red blood onto her lips. The monitors, had they not been magically silenced by Nathaniel's presence, would be screaming their alarms. She was crashing. The final descent had begun. The edges of her vision were turning grey, the cold numbness creeping up her legs. I'm dying right now, aren't I? She whispered, a tear finally escaping and tracking down her hollow cheek. Your heart will stop in approximately 4 minutes, Nathaniel confirmed clinically, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of intense urgency. He reached into his tailored jacket and retrieved a small obsidian blade. I need your consent, Audrey. The transition requires submission, or the venom will tear your mind apart. Fear, raw and primal, warred with the darkest, most desperate human instinct. Survival. She looked at the bleak hospital room, the IV bags that had been her only companions, the bleak future of a wooden box lowered into the cold earth of Queens. Then she looked at the immortal predator, offering her the universe. Do it, she gasped, her eyes rolling back slightly as her blood pressure bottomed out. I want to live. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. In a blur of motion, he sliced the palm of his own hand with the obsidian blade. His blood didn't run like human blood. It was thick, dark crimson, shimmering with an unnatural luminescence. Before Audrey could react, he pressed his bleeding palm over her mouth. Drink, he commanded, his voice echoing in her skull. Swallow the dark. The moment his blood hit her tongue, it felt like swallowing liquid lightning. The taste was overwhelming. Copper, crushed velvet, and raw electricity. Her dying body seized violently. It wasn't a gentle healing. It was a biological war. Nathaniel withdrew his hand, his eyes flashing to a predatory crimson. He leaned down, his lips brushing the delicate, bruised skin of her neck just above her jugular. Now, I take the human weakness away. His fangs pierced her flesh. The pain was blinding, a sharp, white-hot agony that made her back arch off the hospital bed. She felt the pull, the terrifying sensation of her life force being drained out of her, rapid and merciless. The grey at the edges of her vision turned to pitch black. She was falling into an endless abyss, her human heart giving its final pathetic flutter before stopping entirely. The machines would have flatlined. She was clinically dead, but then the lightning she had swallowed ignited. The venom in Nathaniel's blood hit her dead heart like a defibrillator powered by a supernova. Her eyes snapped open, but she was no longer seeing the dim, blue hospital room. She saw the world in ultra-high definition. She could see the microscopic dust motes suspended in the air. She could hear the frantic heartbeat of Nurse Brenda down the hall, the hum of the electricity in the walls, the scurry of a rat in the basement 7 floors down, the pain in her bones, the deep, agonizing ache of the leukemia was being actively incinerated. She felt her bone marrow violently reconstructing itself. Her atrophied muscles swelled with impossible, terrifying strength. The bruising on her arms faded from purple to yellow to flawless, pale perfection in seconds. Nathaniel pulled back, a smear of her blood on his lips. He looked at her, his chest heaving slightly, a look of profound triumph on his face. Audrey sat up. She didn't use her hands to push herself. Her core muscles just snapped her into an upright position with a terrifying snap of kinetic energy. She ripped the IV lines from her arms. There was no bleeding. The puncture wounds sealed themselves before the plastic tubing hit the floor. What am I? She whispered. Her voice was different, clear as crystal, resonant and dangerous. You are a miracle, Audrey Kensington, Nathaniel said, offering her his hand. Suddenly, the heavy hospital door rattled. The stasis loop had broken. Footsteps were rushing down the hall. Code Blue, room 412. We've lost telemetry, Dr. Hayes's panicked voice echoed through the corridor, followed by the crash of a medical cart. Nathaniel gripped Audrey's hand. It is time to leave the world of the dying. With a sudden, violent kick, Nathaniel shattered the reinforced glass of the 7th-floor window. The freezing storm roared into the room, scattering medical charts and knocking over the IV poles. Audrey looked down at the sheer drop to York Avenue. Terror flashed, but it was instantly replaced by an exhilarating, predatory thrill. She looked at Nathaniel, squeezed his hand with bone-crushing force, and together they stepped out into the void just as Dr. Jonathan Hayes burst through the door. The doctor froze, dropping the defibrillator paddles. Room 412 was empty. The bed was covered in shattered glass, the storm raging outside. But it was the medical chart on the floor that caught his eye. The pages were blank, the ink seemingly erased, leaving only a single, elegant sentence written in dark, crimson fluid. "She is no longer yours to save." The descent from the hospital window was a terrifying blur. Audrey did not scream as chilling euphoria seized her chest. Nathaniel held her tightly while cutting through the icy rain. They fell like a singular arrow through the freezing night. They landed silently on a slick, dark rooftop below them. New York City spread beneath them like a sprawling grid. To her newborn eyes, it was a pulsing, vibrant web. She could see heat radiating from the towering glass skyscrapers. She heard the collective pulse of millions of sleeping humans. They were all trapped forever within their fragile, fleeting mortality. "Welcome to your new kingdom," Nathaniel murmured into the night. His voice hummed like a resonant vibration in her marrow. The Nocturne Syndicate operates entirely beneath the notice of mortals. We own the banks, pharmaceutical companies, and the corrupt politicians. But our massive wealth cannot buy survival from this plague. He led her toward a hidden, rusted air conditioning unit. The metal doors parted softly, revealing an opulent velvet interior. They descended rapidly for what truly felt like several miles. They plunged deep into the solid bedrock of Manhattan Island. They traveled far beneath the deepest isolated dark subway lines. "The pathogen," Audrey said while testing syllables on her tongue. "You mentioned a deadly virus earlier. How do vampires sicken?" The elevator shuddered gently as it sped downward into darkness. She noticed her reflection in the polished, dark mahogany wood. Her cheeks were full, and her sickly pallor was gone. "It was engineered," Nathaniel replied, with amber eyes darkening terribly. "During the First World War, an alchemist sought our destruction. He created a synthetic enzyme that corrupts our regenerative cells. It causes the thirst to burn without ever granting satisfaction. We starve slowly while going violently mad in the process." The elevator chimed softly, and the heavy doors slid open. They revealed a sprawling, magnificent subterranean palace of black marble. Thousands of dripping wax candles illuminated massive glittering crystal chandeliers. Dozens of figures moved gracefully through the grand cavernous hall. They dressed in elaborate garments, spanning 3 centuries of fashion. The moment Nathaniel stepped onto the marble, silence fell instantly. Every single eye turned toward them in the dim lighting. These were the apex predators and legendary hunters of night, yet their faces were gaunt and ringed with dark shadows. They were dying a slow death, exactly like she was. "They smell you," Nathaniel whispered, stepping slightly in front now. "They smell the rare antigen flowing in your perfect veins. To them, you are an oasis in an endless desert. But they know the law well because you are mine. You are the only key to saving our entire species." A tall woman wearing tattered crimson silk glided forward menacingly. Her striking beauty was heavily marred by hollow, starving cheeks. "Nathaniel," she hissed, locking onto Audrey with pure, ravenous intensity. "You actually found her tonight. The golden marrow prophecy holds. Give her to us and let us drink the cure." "Step back, Victoria," Nathaniel warned with a loud, guttural growl. The terrifying sound reverberated heavily through the dark marble floor. "Audrey is completely transformed, but she is still dangerously volatile. The cure requires her blood to be synthesized, not drained. Control your wretched, starving impulses before I end your existence." Victoria bared her fangs, snapping her jaws in deep frustration. She retreated slowly into the crowd of murmuring, desperate vampires. Audrey felt a strange stirring deep inside her new chest. It was not fear, but a dark assertion of dominance. She was the most valuable creature in this subterranean world. "Follow me," Nathaniel ordered, guiding Audrey through the parting sea. They walked down a long corridor, lined with ancient tapestries. Modern security cameras watched them from the high, shadowed corners. They finally arrived at a sterile, modern medical laboratory room. Stainless steel tables contrasted sharply with the Gothic outside hall. A man in a pristine white coat turned around quickly. He looked completely human and devoid of predatory vampire grace. "My king," the mortal scientist said, bowing his head respectfully. "Is this the host?" he asked with cold, clinical detachment. He wiped his gloved hands. "I am Dr. Harrison, miss." "Yes," Nathaniel said. "The leukemia was eradicated by my venom. The antigen has survived the mutation, so begin the extraction." Audrey felt a flicker of unease at the clinical words. The word extraction felt too close to her medical trauma. She crossed her arms tightly, standing her ground very firmly. "Wait!" Audrey commanded loudly. Her own voice surprised her completely. It cracked like a physical whip in the quiet room. Dr. Harrison blinked, unaccustomed to the fresh livestock speaking up. Nathaniel turned to look at her, raising a single eyebrow. "I agreed to a trade, Nathaniel, not to unquestioning servitude. I am saving your species," Audrey continued, stepping toward him, "but I will not be strapped down and farmed daily. If you want my blood, I will set the terms. I want a seat at your table with full authority. I want to rule beside you as a true equal." His eyes flared with a highly dangerous, bright golden light. For a moment, the tension was thick enough to cut. Then a slow, wicked smile spread across his aristocratic face. "You have been immortal for less than an hour, dear, and already you boldly demand a crown upon your head." Weeks passed inside the glorious subterranean palace of the Syndicate. Audrey adapted to her new eternal life with frightening speed. She never felt tired, and she never felt any pain. The daily blood extractions were painless and supervised by Nathaniel. Dr. Harrison successfully synthesized the first batches of the cure. But the distribution of the cure created massive political friction. Nathaniel rationed the vaccine to ensure absolute loyalty among factions. Victoria and her starving loyalists grew increasingly impatient and furious. They believed the pure source would offer much faster salvation. They plotted secretly to take the young queen for themselves. It happened during the annual midnight gala of the elders. Audrey wore a stunning gown of midnight blue velvet silk. She stood beside the throne, observing the waltzing immortal nobility. Nathaniel stepped away briefly to consult with his security chief. In that fleeting moment, the grand hall plunged into darkness. Chaos erupted instantly as vampires hissed loudly in the blackness. Audrey felt cold hands grab her bare arms with force. She was dragged backward into a hidden stone servant corridor. The torches flared to life, revealing Victoria and 5 guards. Their amber eyes were holed with pure, raging blood starvation. Victoria stepped forward, displaying her terrifying fangs to the queen. She despised the rationing and wanted the golden blood completely. "We will drain you entirely and become immortal gods tonight." One of the starving guards lunged forward without any warning. Audrey did not cower or scream for her powerful king. Instead, she let her newfound predatory instincts take complete control. She grabbed the attacking guard by his cold, pale throat. With a vicious twist, she snapped his neck like timber. His body crumbled into heavy ash upon the stone floor. Victoria gasped in absolute horror, taking a fearful step backward. "I am not a helpless human patient anymore, you fool," Audrey snarled loudly, while her own razor-sharp fangs descended. "I am the absolute cure and your worst nightmare tonight." She moved with blinding speed toward the terrified rebel leader. Audrey drove her tight fist directly into the older vampire. The rebel leader crashed violently through the heavy wooden doors. They tumbled back into the grand hall before the crowd. The lights flickered back on, revealing the shocking, violent scene. Audrey stood tall over the defeated Victoria, breathing very heavily. Nathaniel emerged from the large crowd with a proud grin. He made no sudden move to stop his beautiful queen. She plotted vicious treason against the noble crown tonight, everyone, Audrey declared with immense authority echoing off the marble walls. She sought to steal the cure and murder your king. I have spared her miserable life to teach a lesson. Anyone who challenges my royal reign will meet dark fates. The silence in the large room was absolute and profound. Slowly, the ancient vampires began kneeling upon the marble floor. They bowed their heads in complete submission to the host. Nathaniel walked forward and gently took her perfectly flawless hand. He raised it high for the entire syndicate to witness. "Long live the immortal queen," he shouted into the hall. "Long live the glorious queen." The immortal crowd chanted loudly. Audrey looked at the kneeling predators, feeling immense, deep satisfaction. She had traded a sterile deathbed for an eternal throne. The scared, dying girl from room 412 was gone. Later that quiet evening, they stood together on a balcony. They overlooked the glowing city skyline of restless mortal souls. The massive storm had passed, leaving a crisp, starry night. "You handled Victoria with remarkable, graceful ruthlessness, my dear queen," Nathaniel whispered softly, while looking deeply into her bright eyes. "I survived brutal cancer for 2 years," she replied slowly. "A few starving vampires are nothing compared to that hell." She leaned against the stone balustrade, feeling the freezing wind. "The miracle cure is working perfectly across the entire syndicate. The terrifying mortality rate has completely stopped among our kind. We will soon rebuild the entire syndicate to former glory. But we will do it under my strict modern rules." "As you wish, my majestic queen," Nathaniel agreed without hesitation. He wrapped his strong arms around her, pulling her close. "We have endless eternity to reshape this world for us. No more hiding in the deep shadows like hunted beasts. We will integrate and conquer the human world very slowly." Audrey smiled happily, revealing her sharp fangs in the moonlight. Her blood was no longer a symbol of tragic decay. It was the golden elixir, holding an entire supernatural empire. She pressed a cold, lingering kiss against his pale lips. Their dark union marked the beginning of a terrifying era. The busy hospitals of the city continued their futile struggles. Doctors like Jonathan Hayes mourned the sudden loss of patients. They never understood the miracles vanishing into the deep night. Meanwhile, the immortals thrived beneath the busy streets of Manhattan. They grew noticeably stronger every single day under new rulers. Audrey Kensington ruled the dark, hidden world with absolute grace. She never forgot the tremendous value of life or power. She controlled the shadows, while Nathaniel commanded the vast armies. Together they were the unstoppable, dangerous force of the night. The Vampire King had offered dark eternity, and she accepted. The mortal doctors had said she only had one night, But one magical night was all she needed to transform. Her fragile human weakness was completely erased by his venom. She was the golden savior and the most ruthless queen. Forever truly belonged to her, and she would never yield. She watched the glowing, beautiful city lights shining so brightly. The syndicate would rise from the ashes stronger than ever. New York City belonged to the vampires and their queen. They would rule this mighty modern empire for endless centuries. The grand story of the dying sick girl was over. The legendary epic tale of the immortal queen had begun. Did you enjoy this dark, thrilling vampire romance story? If her ruthless journey to the immortal throne captivated you, please take a moment to like this video right now. Share this incredible story with all your fantasy-loving friends. Do not forget to hit that subscribe button for tales. We post epic, dark, fantasy and romance dramas every week. Leave a comment below about your favorite plot twist today. Thank you for watching and supporting our dark storytelling channel.